In the auction hall, a middle-aged man dressed as a scholar wandered onto the high platform. The light beams from the strange stones used for lighting around him shined on his body, which set off his unparalleled temperament, especially holding a paper fan, making him seem more and more chic and suave. This middle-aged man has natural red lips and white teeth, and some horn lines at the corners of his eyes. Not only do not show oldness but add a kind of maturity that has gone through the vicissitudes of life. At this moment, people can't help but give birth to a dreamlike feeling. At the very least, many young girls participating in the auction in the hall can't help showing their obsessive looks, seeming to be attracted by it. However, many martial artists who recognize this middle-aged man's identity are all stunned, and their faces were hard to look. Many more quiet discussions and whispers sounded. Damn, it was the little black face who presided over this auction. What the hell is Treasure Assembly Pavilion doing? It's over. This time I fell into the pit again. I knew that Treasure Assembly Pavilion definitely didn't have any kind intentions, but I didn't expect this guy to came out. He has not been out for more than a decade. All kinds of discussions were mixed. Although the voices were not loud, the cultivators who participated in the auction were not low in cultivation. Naturally, they heard these words clearly, and the middle-aged scholar called the little black face was not only lifeless. On the contrary, he still smiled kindly, as if not caring the people criticizing him, but the young girls who fell for it, all viciously swept their beautiful eyes around, straight at him. Little black face? In the private room number 13, Xianxia frowned. If he thought about it, does this person have anything to do with Mr. Old Yan? Since Yan Pei is an old black face, then this person must have something to do with Yan Pei to be called a little black face, but Xianxia does not understand why the cultivator below treat him like a tiger or a leopard, and they are so afraid of his appearance. Yang Yan also looked at the girl on the side for inquiry, expecting her to give an explanation. Xianxia pursed her mouth, seeming to want to laugh, but she didn't dare to be too improper, and finally managed to hold back her smile. Then she whispered, going back to the two seniors, "This Mr. Rentian Rui is an auctioneer in the establishment. And Mr. Yan is his master. That's why everyone calls him." Xianxia didn't dare to say any more when she said this. It doesn't matter if people call little black face an old black face. Although it is just a nickname, it is also the reputation that Yan Pei and Rentian Rui have broken down by themselves. But the girl is a part of Treasure Assembly Pavilion. Of course she dare not criticize the seniors of the establishment behind his back. Otherwise, when the people know it, she will definitely not be able to eat and walk. Xianxia laughed dumbly and nodded. That's how it is. I understand. It seems that this auctioneer named Rentian Rui is quite familiar with Yan Pei, otherwise he wouldn't be called like that. If he participates in the auction, he will have to be careful. On the high platform, Rentian Rui smiled warmly, cupped his fist, and said loudly, "You all come from afar, and you have worked so hard to participate in this auction of my Treasure Assembly Pavilion. The people in Treasure Assembly Pavilion are grateful. This auction will be held by this Ren. If there is something wrong, please forgive me." His words were extremely decent, and people couldn't find the slightest flaw. No matter what he was like when he presided over the auction, at least his words had attracted the favor of countless people. Rentian Rui said again, "Speaking of which, this auction was originally hosted by my master." As soon as this statement came out, many people's complexions changed slightly, and they subconsciously covered their own space ring, and looked vigilantly toward the high platform. Their faces were hard to look, as if they were afraid that Yan Pei would suddenly pop out from any corner. Fortunately, Rentian Rui smiled slightly and said again, "However, the junior thinks that it is better to live behind the scenes because the teacher is already old. This opportunity for the limelight will be given to me, the young people." Well said. The sound of applause sounded from the bottom. Brother Ren is so courageous and bold. Let old man Yan stay behind the scenes forever. There was a burst of laughter. Rentian Rui also smiled and looked at a place in the hall, and nodded. Ren also means that. After this auction is over, he will definitely persuade his master to take care of his life and stop working hard. Although this is a bit rebellious, it is undeniable, but it quickly aroused the goodwill and resonance of many people, and suddenly made everyone's vigilance against him disappear. Instead, he felt that he could stand here and preside over the auction. Not simple. Xianxia narrowed his eyes and looked at that Rentianrui faintly. With just a few words, he integrated himself into the group. Although it was just a simple opening remark, he had already laid enough auction capital for him. When the auction starts, even if he asks a higher price, not many people will reject him. This Rentianrui is well versed in the world, no wonder he can be called a little black face, but this host style seems completely different from Yanpei, which is quite interesting. Okay, I won't talk more about the gossip. I am afraid that many friends are already waiting anxiously. Let's start this auction now. Rentianrui slapped the folding fan in his hand, turned half of his body, and gestured behind him. A woman wearing a palace costume over there, with a smile, walked lightly on the high platform, holding a jade plate on her arm, came to stand in front of Rentianrui. Although the lady in the palace dress looks extraordinary and full of spring in her eyes, not many people are looking at her at this moment. Since everyone is here to participate in the auction, everyone's attention is naturally attracted by the jade plate she has brought. Needless to say, the items on the jade plate must be the first auction item, but unfortunately it was covered by the red cloth, making people unable to see the item. Many cultivators who participated in the auction stretched their necks and looked around. Rentianrui watched his words and thoughts, then said, according to the basis of each auction, although this first auction item is not comparable to the finale, it is not trivial. If you are interested, you must win it. Otherwise, if you miss this opportunity, you will regret it forever. Speaking like this, he stretched out his hand to uncover the red cloth, and suddenly a colorless bead the size of a goose egg appeared in the eyes of everyone. The bead looked transparent, but there were inexplicable silk threads inside like a fish swimming, and what is even more bizarre is that this bead has no energy fluctuations, as if it is just an ornamental item, with no actual value. What is this? Never seen it. Since Treasure Assembly Pavilion dares to bring out the first auction, it must have its uniqueness. It will be clear if Mr. Ren explains it. Storage Spirit Bead. In the private room number B13, Yang Yan was bright, and burst the name of the first auction item. Xianxia cast a glance at her, and it was no surprise. He suspects that there is nothing in this world that Yang Yan does not recognize, otherwise he would not bring Yang Yan to the auction alone. Xianxia also didn't ask what purpose this storage spirit bead was for, because he knew that Rentianrui would definitely explain it carefully. On the high platform, Rentianrui stretched out his hand and picked up the storage spirit bead. He held it high and did not speak. He only encouraged his own Saint Yuan and poured it in madly. Under the eyes of everyone, the colorless bead seemed to be a bottomless pit. All the Saint Yuan poured into it is absorbed. But as time went on, the round bead actually emitted a faint light, and immediately after that, a wave of Saint Yuan that was exactly the same as Rentianrui's body radiated from the bead. After a while, Rentianrui stopped his movements, smiled strangely again, and silently urged the exercises again. An astonishing thing happened. The Saint Yuan, who had been swallowed by this storage spirit bead before, returned to Rentianrui's body once again, and looking at his expression, they couldn't tell whether it was not appropriate or uncomfortable. After a while, the spirit storage orb returned to its original transparent appearance, but there was no energy fluctuation inside. The whole process was clearly seen by everyone. By this time, 9 out of 10 of the cultivators participating in the auction had a vague guess about the function of the storage spirit bead, and they immediately looked at the high platform with excitement. Rentianrui smiled and said loudly, "You must already know the purpose of this storage bead." Yes, it can store the Saint Yuan from the cultivator body, and feed it back to the cultivator's body when needed to provide the warrior with the power to fight. Friends here must have fought with others, knowing that in the process of fighting, the way to replenish the Saint Yuan is to take pill and absorb the energy of the Saint Crystal, but no matter which one, the effect is very slow, but this storage spirit bead is different. It can restore a cultivator from the dry state of Saint Yuan to the peak in a very short time. The premise is that enough energy is stored in the storage spirit bead. As soon as this statement was made, the hall immediately exploded. Although there was speculation just now, it was only after Ren Tianrui explained it carefully that everyone found that they had underestimated the value of the storage spirit bead. If this is the case, then this storage spirit bead is equivalent to a second life. The reason why many cultivators fall is because the Saint Yuan is exhausted when fighting with people. If there is a storage spirit bead to replenish the Saint Yuan, then you can turn defeat into victory. Suddenly, countless hot eyes looked up on the high platform, with a greed and covet in their eyes. If it weren't for the scruples that this was the auction of Treasure Assembly Pavilion, there were countless of masters inside and outside of the town. There would definitely be people who are desperate enough to snatch it. Even Xianxia, who is in the B13 private room, was full of emotions. This kind of thing can almost be said to be heaven-defying. Even with his wealth, he can't ignore it, let alone other people. But this thing is useless to him, because Xianxia has never been short of Saint Yuan, so this thought was only a flash, and he calmly watched. After all, such a good thing must be expensive at auction. Although he has brought over 70 million Saint Crystals, he still has no idea whether he can grab the auction item he needs. Now if he uses the Saint Crystals, when the funds are insufficient, then the gain will not be worth the loss. To be continued.